7-Year Bitch, from the book Ear Candy by author A.Akil. Being married isn't easy, and anyone who has told you otherwise is lying. I tried to hide it, but as much as I claimed to be in love with my husband in my women's circles, I felt like there was something missing. By this point in our marriage, I have come to the conclusion that it wasn't him. He hadn't changed. He was still the great father he had always been to our 2 children, and the same hardworking man who I fell in love with many years before. When I think of this, I find it hurtful and frustrating to know that the truth was, it was me. I tried not to be too hard on myself since I already had enough pressure coming from all angles. I had been a stay-at-home mom for most of our marriage, but after a few years of our expenses steadily increasing, the financial strain forced my husband to say the words that I still dread to this day. I need you to go back to work. Although my husband had completely sponsored my master's degree, I wanted that more as a trophy than an actual work credential. I was perfectly fine with being a wife and a mother. And yes, before you try to judge me, this is not a story about a selfish woman. Actually, maybe it is, and you know what? I'm okay with that. I felt that after all of these years of sacrifice, I deserved to be selfish. I had given most of my life to this relationship, and now I was forced to go back to work. I had been silently building resentment towards my new life changes. So one evening when my coworkers invited me out for an after-work happy hour at the Blue Martini, I decided to accept and enjoy the night like normal work folk. I called my sister to ask her to pick up my kids and told her I would grab them later. She agreed. When I arrived at the lounge, everyone was laughing and smiling. The music was great and the environment was a much-needed break from my routine of catering to family and everyone else. I felt relieved and free again. Perhaps because I was in the company of my new young work buddies. I tried not to spoil the moment by overthinking, so I decided to indulge myself with a brightly colored cocktail and look around the room with new eyes. The sexy young bartender approached me with a flirty smile and fine physique, asked me,
"What do you want?"
This question completely caught me off guard. I stared at him 3 seconds too long, and he repeats the question.
"What can I get for you?"
Good question, I think. I was under the impression he had asked something completely different before, but then I started to ponder. What do I want? It had been so long since I really thought about exactly what I wanted. I blushed at the thought and ordered another round of whatever concoction my coworkers had been ordering to make me feel all nice and warm on the inside. It has been extremely difficult lately to find the time to enjoy those intimate moments that brought my husband and I together, especially since we have been dealing with our financial stresses. In our bed, I found myself clinging to the far corner of the mattress. Long gone was the time when I welcomed his warm body against mine. I had come to the point where I almost despised his touch. So, when asked by the drink specialist what it is that I want, even though I know he meant libations, my mind strayed to thoughts of desire. What did I want? I wanted to be fucked. I wanted to be fucked by someone who was not my husband. This may sound crazy, but I just really needed to take my frustrations out on someone's dick in the worst way. I didn't want to be respected or treated nicely. I get that at home. I needed someone who would go wild on me with no filter. I know. I sound like a slut, right? That's just the liquor talking. I've allowed my coworkers to convince me that I can handle 2 of these blue drinks. One of the drinks had a blue glow stick, the other did not. I later found out that they called the drink without the light an adios. I didn't know until after I finished the second one that adios means goodbye in Spanish. That's exactly how I was feeling like I needed to say goodbye before I began to lose my self-control. My coworkers started to leave, but I decided that I needed to stay and have a glass of water before making the dreaded journey home. It's pathetic to admit this, but it had been way too long since I had a night out. The second round of drinks had me feeling all warm and fuzzy, so I lingered a little longer at the bar. My husband and I decided that we wouldn't drink in our marriage. It was more his decision, and I agreed. But the truth was that I enjoyed having a drink or 2 every now and again. Shit, maybe I'd even like 3 or 4. I'm a grown-ass woman after all, and I do not need anyone counting my drinks. I just sat there listening attentively to the live singer blow out Sade's Sweetest Taboo in the background, and I couldn't help myself from smiling. The singer was amazing and even had Sade's sex appeal to match. I chair danced in my seat and sang along. If I tell you now, then all of a sudden, my vibe was disturbed by a deep voice that came inquiring from behind.
"Is that seat taken?"
He said. The proximity of these words resonated throughout my body and gave me goosebumps. I turned around slowly to respond, and there he was. Richard Thompson, my high school crush, was standing over me like a tall glass of ice water during a Las Vegas summer. And I was thirsty. I was extremely thirsty. I took a moment to take his presence in, all of him tall, dark, and handsome. My 3 favorite things. The fact that he was dressed in a 3-piece suit that was tailored to perfection put the icing on the cake. He didn't smile, but instead stood there staring at me with his arrogant demeanor, which has always been a part of his charm. I suddenly remembered how he had dissed me back in the day, and why I decided to go with my good guy over assholes like him. But that being said, there is nothing like a bad boy, and we all know how that ends. Back at the bar, I tell him no, that the seat is not taken. He takes off his suit coat and places it neatly on the back of his newly found chair, revealing his suspenders. I suddenly feel the need to readjust in my seat. I don't understand why this jerk still has this effect on me after all of this time. Back in high school, I allowed his sex appeal and smooth-talking ass to take my virginity, which is something that I never told anyone, not even my husband. How could I tell anyone about him when the next day he acted like it had never happened? I tried hard not to think about our little moment, but how could I forget that first feeling of passion, no matter how it turned out? So there we were, all these years later, and I was far from the little naive girl that he once preyed upon. This time, I was the hunter. As he began to take a seat, I start gathering my things. He laughed and asked,
"Did I scare you off?"
I didn't see the humor. I just looked at him and rolled my eyes. I told him, "The only thing that I am scared of is your negative energy being contagious." Ouch, I thought. I said it with so much attitude that I even surprised myself. I began to walk away, but he jumped out of his chair and grabbed my wrist, gently pulling me back towards him. The sudden movement pulls me so unexpectedly close to him that I can feel his chest and smell his expensive cologne. I closed my eyes for a moment to gather my thoughts, and I could feel his gaze down on me. I smelled his exhale. It's so familiar. He puts his hands on my waist, then looks directly in my eyes and said,
"I'm sorry for everything I have done in the past. Please don't leave. I need you. I can't be alone right now."
I had to admit that I was surprised to see him so vulnerable, and it softened my my shell a bit. He looked so sincere and even had sadness in his eyes. "Fine, but I can only stay for 5 more minutes and then I have to leave," I said as I returned to my seat. I still kept a little attitude, but realized it was fading quickly, mostly because of the fact that I really wasn't ready to go home. He flashed a smile of satisfaction. I slid back into my chair. He called the waitress over and smoothly ordered 2 glasses of Cristal champagne. I told him that I didn't need any more to drink, but he gave me a look that let me know that saying no to him was not an option. He convinced me to have just one for celebration's sake. He had me with hello, but I lied to myself by confirming that I am only staying because I was curious to find out what we were celebrating. We talked for a while, and he opened up to me about some of the things that he'd been going through over the past few years. He described what seemed to be the perfect life. The whole platinum package that included a dream job, gorgeous wife, 3 kids, and a dog. Yet, here he was at the bar celebrating his divorce. It seemed to be a bittersweet moment for him. Under the influence of the 3rd, or was it the 4th, drink, I confided in him about some of the issues that I was going through in my marriage as well. As we bonded over our misfortunes, the time passed quickly, and I realized that I was way over the agreed time limit. I also found myself enjoying our unexpected, deep conversation a little too much. From our stories, it was decided that we deserved a survival shot for all of the issues we had endured and survived in our marriages. We ordered one last round and toasted to destiny, bringing us both to the bar that evening.
"Our last shot is to my first."
My first asshole, I laughed. He looked puzzled. I changed the subject. My phone buzzed and I saw that it was my husband. I looked at my watch and realized I had been at the bar for almost 3 hours. I texted him back and let him know that I was finishing up at the office and would be home soon. He replied, "Okay, baby, and don't worry, I already picked up the kids." I almost felt guilty about the lie, but then I remembered that it was him that put me out here in the first place. If it were up to me, I would already be home playing house. I justified my whereabouts with the facts. This encounter was my husband's fault. Talking to Richard about his new status as a divorcee made me think about how unhappy I was feeling in my own marriage. My husband and I had definitely grown apart. We hadn't had sex in months, and the way I was feeling, it wouldn't be happening anytime soon. My thoughts were beginning to haunt my mood. I decided that it was getting later and harder to maintain my self-control. It would be torture to stay any longer in the presence of this man from my past who still had an effect on me as if we had been together this whole time. He still did something to me, something to my emotions, something to my body. When I told him that I had to go, he sadly asked if he could walk me to my car. Though it went against my better judgment, I replied, yes, that would be nice.